Everyone, please follow me. 起立，面向佛堂，参加三鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，参加各位点传是一鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。Please have a seat. Ready to rock and roll? I'm gonna mute my microphone, sir.
All righty, wonderful, thank you. And good morning or good evening or good afternoon to everybody wherever you happen to be this wonderful Sunday. It is a gorgeous, just beautiful, sunny and warm Sunday in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I can't think of a better way to start a day of studying the Tao teachings. Until my son quit that yelling. Pardon me, I had to make a brief child adjustment. Today, I'm going to talk just a bit about karma, instant karma in particular. It's a subject I've addressed before, but today's talk's kind of special. And as a matter of fact, this particular talk is a direct derivation of an event that occurred with my son and I about 2 days ago that you're all going to laugh hysterically at, but it bears sharing. Hence the title for the talk. However, a discussion on what is karma and what's the nature and essence of karma is always a good discussion to have. There are actually a great variety of definitions and interpretations for what karma is, and a pretty wide set of philosophies, theologies, religions, and traditions that embrace some form of karmic philosophy or set of beliefs. Some of them include an effect of karma in past and future lives with teachings including rebirth. Some do not. Some don't even reference the word karma, but rather colloquialize the concepts and thoughts in other phrases. Some of the ones we'd recognize here would be what goes around comes around, or one getting what one deserves, or getting one's comeuppance, things like that, all stem from, believe it or not, the very ancient concepts and thoughts of karmic justice and karma in the lives of people. Whether or not a particular belief system or tradition includes a philosophy of rebirth or reincarnation, or the effect of karma on past and future lives or not, there are a couple of common themes that run through nearly all of those traditions. And one of those is that karma itself is kind of the universal law of cause and effect. That's remarkably common. I also believe it to be true. And interestingly enough, despite the variations on a theme, the concept of karma itself is actually, I'm discovering, a global concept that societies and collections of people the world over all share some kind of belief in universal justice, in present life justice, if you will. Whether or not there's a set of ethics and morals tied to that justice or not, that the intent and action of individuals is coupled to some form of consequences as a result of the intents and the actions. And so the essence of karma weighs on the intent and action of the individual. That is, what we do, and perhaps more importantly than what we do, why we do what we do. For instance, what we do out of ignorance, the lack of understanding or knowledge, true ignorance, not feigned ignorance. According to most traditions, carries no karmic weight because one can't be held accountable for what one does not know. However, those actions done with intent and purpose carry karmic weight that is tied directly to the actor and dependent upon their intent. We all kind of know that at a visceral level. We know it at an intellectual level. For those who study the Tao teachings and perhaps other traditions as well, we know that at an intellectual level as well. We understand that our intents and our actions have weight and consequence. We know that our intents and our actions can have either positive or negative consequences, that we can accrue both positive and negative karma depending upon what we do and why we do it. That if our intent is impure, if our hearts and minds are impure as we commit whatever act it is we're committing, that price tag may be steeper than we want to pay. Additionally, if our hearts are pure, if our intent is pure, if our goals are virtuous and positive, the karmic price tag is very light and good for us. It's an accrual of positive karma. It may good and well be that karma affects past and present and future lives as well. The question there becomes one of, if we're born into this life with no memory of a past life, how then can we know the karmic lessons we're supposed to learn and overcome the karma that we may be here to undo or pay for? If we're living in the present and trying to atone for the past, how do we know what it is we're atoning for? I don't have a real good answer for that. I've got to tell you, it's not one of the things that I worry about too terribly much. I believe in free agency and free choice, and that the action of karma rests upon our current thoughts and deeds, our current intent, and that we may have wound up in our current circumstances because of something that we did previously, but that through that same mechanism, we will wind up presented with the opportunities to undo that karma, to live past it, to accrue positive karma, and therefore, hopefully one day, have ourselves wind up fully awakened. One of the other common threads that runs through the vast majority of the traditions related to karma is that of entanglement. This isn't quantum entanglement. This is individual entanglement. It is the web of karma that is represented by all of the souls that we touch in our lifetimes, all of the people that we come into contact with, all of the relationships that we have, what we do and say and think with all of the people that ever come into and move out of our lives. To untangle the web of karma for any one person based on the number of people that they should or should not have touched in their lifetimes is virtually impossible. I can't even begin in my own mind to wrap my head around how vast that web of karma is. And so to get that down to a scale I can actually deal with, I have to think about individuals, the relationships that I'm in, one person at a time. My children, my wife, my friends, my students, all of you, and everyone else that my soul touches, whether I know it or not. And if you stop to think about it for a moment, it is entirely possible through our own actions to have an effect on people that we never see. Because what we do to one person may spread to another person and another person and another person through the actions of the person that we touched. Hence the entanglement, hence the vastness of the web. And so in the Tao teachings, we talk about maintaining harmonious relationships. We talk about avoiding contention and conflict. We talk about keeping the peace. We talk about guarding our words. We talk about virtuous intent and virtuous actions. Those things are important. The life that we injure may injure several others because of what we thought or what we did or what we said. And we may not be able to call back the impact of those words and those actions on people that we have never seen and will never meet. It's an interesting and perhaps somewhat scary concept. So what's the cause and effect? Well, as we're talking about right now, we all have our own beliefs, our own thoughts, our own belief systems and values, our own essence, our own spirit. We have our own thoughts. We commit our own deeds based on what we know, what we believe, what we think we believe, and how we react and respond to the thoughts and deeds of others. Those things that we do that carry with them intent and purpose, even when they're reactions, the knee-jerk emotional responses to unanticipated situations, are under the law of cause and effect. There are consequences to even those reactions. To an unmoderated and unrestrained spirit, the words and deeds can carry tremendous weight. Not so much for ignorance and accidents, for what we do born out of misunderstanding or the absence of education. But I believe that it's incumbent upon us as cultivators of the Tao teachings to eradicate ignorance and mitigate accidents by direct effort at understanding and applying the Tao teachings that are right in front of our faces. We have access both to the purest source of the writings and teachings of Lao Tzu and Chuang-Tzu and several others, and through Derek and the masters at the temple, the original oral traditions that up until now have been almost entirely concealed from the West, simply because the vast majority of us don't speak Chinese, nor have any idea that those oral traditions existed, such that we can bring those questions to these folks and get real, authentic, genuine answers, real knowledge, real wisdom, the ability to correct our path, to change the direction that we're walking, to alter the way we think and the way we behave so that we don't accrue that karma based on our own ignorance or our own accidental slips and stumbles. I don't know about everybody else, but I fall down enough on my own way to trying to become enlightened that I'll accept about any legitimate help on the way if it keeps me from stumbling over something I didn't see before. But there are always those who have motives that are outside of the virtuous, motives of self-gain or resistance, or perhaps an aversion to being guided and directed to a more virtuous path. Heaven knows when I was younger, I was one of those people. I resisted heavily being told what to do, how to do it, or why to do it. As I've aged and matured, I've learned better, I hope. And yet some of my most humbling educational experiences have been born out of my own motives, the need to be right, the need to be heard, pride, if you will, the need to not be embarrassed or mortified in front of others. Interestingly enough, I find that when we act from those kinds of motives, even though we think we're protecting ourselves, we wind up really looking dumb and usually being humbled severely. Those things karmically help us to learn not to do those things, to set aside the negative emotional states, to set aside the motives that protect the ego and ignore the true self, for a better way to accrue positive karma and not embarrass ourselves in the process so much. To those who either intentionally or unintentionally refuse to learn the lessons, there is the accrual of negative karma. And we all know of people who either have or continue to behave badly with a purpose, with intent. In many cases, the jails are full of them. In other cases, they haven't been caught yet. Who knows why people do that, but they do. There are those who ignore the teachings of virtue and virtuous living for whatever reason. There are those who refuse to learn and grow. There are those who continue to languish in negative emotional states and self-destructive behavior, and who knows why they do it. I've said over and over and over again that from the day I started learning and understanding these teachings up until today, I always wondered why people didn't just line up at my door to hear about this wonderful process and these phenomenal teachings that actually produce the results they claim to produce, and do so time after time after time. The simple fact of the matter is this, that the world doesn't want to be saved. The world wants to be left alone. It is those who have the karmic affinity for the Tao teachings who wind up here. Those who are looking for the seed of truth, a better way, a different answer. The rest of the world would prefer not to have the light shined upon them. And I think that's why the line doesn't form at my front door. But for all of us, negatively and positively both, our intents and our actions also carry with it accountability and responsibility. There is no dodging karma. There is no escape from our intents and our actions. And that accountability and responsibility is 100% true in every case. We know in our hearts, no matter what we tell to anybody else, what we did and why we did it. Those things wind up in the universe as well. And we may lie to everybody else, but there's no lying to ourselves. And there's no escaping that universal law of cause and effect. Therefore, in my mind anyway, I consider it better to attempt to accrue positive karma. Hopefully all of you do as well. Or if you don't, maybe I can help you a bit. By attempting with our very best intent and our very best actions to live a virtuous life, to adhere to the virtuous teachings of the Tao Te Ching, to maintain those harmonious relationships, to not get involved in the debates and the conflicts and the contention and the fighting and the ego-driven states of the world, to not be crushed by the illusions of this life, to remain immersed in the positive emotional states that sees the glass as half full and not half empty, that doesn't respond out of spite and anger and ego, but rather out of a more measured and reasonable approach, to remain selfless, to be able to give, to live a life of service to others without expecting to have a parade in your honor or in mine, to bring out the best in everyone that we meet and all of the people that we haven't met. Those things help to accumulate positive karma. And furthermore, over time, they help us to live the kind of life that actually is full of joy and happiness by getting rid of the negative behaviors and thoughts and attitudes that cause us trouble to begin with. I can't think of a time in my life where I've ever gotten in trouble where there wasn't some kind of self-destructive thinking involved in the process. At the time, I may not have known that the thinking was self-destructive, but looking back over the period of my life, absolutely at those times, I could have done better. And I think probably all of us have a few of those skeletons in our closets. But the wonderful thing is, for as long as we can get out of bed breathing every morning, we have another chance to start over and not do that. Which brings us to karmic accrual. I probably by now shouldn't even have to say this, but I'm going to anyway, because it's important. Positive actions, positive intentions, positive thoughts and deeds gather positive karma. Negative actions, negative thoughts, negative intent gather negative karma. It's very, very simple. And karmically speaking, the reason why we do something, the intent, is as important as what we do. If you do the right thing for the wrong reason, it is entirely possible, I think, to wipe out positive karma with negative intent. It is not sufficient to pretend to be virtuous. Rather, one must actually become virtuous. So what's instant karma? You know, it's a widely held belief, and I've heard this quite a bit as well, that karma is something we only have to worry about after we die. That karma is a universal set of justice and rules that weigh in when the spirit leaves the body and we're getting ready to reincarnate. And if we don't happen to believe that that's going to occur, we don't have to worry about karma at all. Well, karma doesn't just affect our future incarnations, if one believes that they occur. Most karma, believe it or not, is felt in really close proximity to the act that created the karma. And I'm going to illustrate that here in a minute. You're all going to laugh at me because of it, and it's okay. Karma in our current lives is truly the effect after the cause. Okay? If we do something we ought not to have done, karma can be amazingly close to the thing we shouldn't have done. And in that case, karma obliges us to learn the lessons that we were supposed to learn and apply the education to our lives. Now, if we don't do that, if we flat out refuse to pay attention to the lessons that our karma brings us, and I don't have this written into this talk, but I'm gonna say this, and I have a very good reason for saying it. If we refuse to learn those lessons, the lessons will come back. And each time that lesson comes around, it's going to come back a little harder and a little faster and a little stronger until one day we get hit by what I call the universal wrecking ball of enlightenment, where the weight of our karma is so heavy that when it hits us, our lives are destroyed. And we're sitting there with a little pile of rubble around our feet that used to be the life we were living. And we have to figure out how to pick those pieces up and make a different life out of them. When one gets to that point, the end result is unbelievably painful and very difficult. It is really rough to deal with and profoundly life-changing. However, the price tag we might pay when that event hits us, I can tell you from experience, is higher than any of us wants to pay. So while you're getting ready to laugh, please understand that karma is a serious and sometimes upending event. When one refuses to learn and apply the lessons of karma, it leads to what we can call current life catastrophes. It may lead to a less auspicious rebirth. If that is part of your tradition and belief system, it is a part of mine. One other concept that I ran into as I was researching this talk was one I had not considered before. The ultimate destruction of a human being because too much negative karma has been accrued on that life. I don't know how much negative karma someone has to accrue to be completely destroyed after death. I don't want to know. I would much prefer not to find out. We can deal with karma, though, the negative karma that we've accrued in our lives. It's not difficult. It does require some discipline. It requires some practice. It requires a conscious intent to not accrue additional negative karma, which has perhaps the unintended consequence of also producing a much happier life. So, the process isn't exactly too difficult. Simply by changing our negative behaviors and habits, by becoming more selfless, more giving, more open, by becoming more virtuous, and by applying the lessons we've learned and the wisdom of our life experience and karma, and by cultivating the spiritual self. I have found it to be virtually impossible to both cultivate the Tao teachings and consider doing something that's really bad at the same time, or even a little bad. I can't think of a real good example at the moment, but for instance, it's difficult for me to get really upset with one of my kids or my wife or one of my friends when I'm working on a talk. I have a tough time with that. My head is completely involved in the Tao teachings and in what I'm trying to do, and it makes having any kind of negative thoughts difficult for me. I know that about myself, so I spend a lot of time trying to remain in that positive sort of Tao-centered, researching my talk mindset. I found that it does me a lot of good. There's another topic that comes up regarding karma that I found interesting. I've heard it referred to a couple of times. Not real sure I understand it. Derek may be able to shed some light on this. I've actually heard it twice. And that is that karmic merit can be transferred. Well, interestingly enough, there are a number of traditions who believe that that's so. And I certainly hope that it is, because in those schools what they say is that merit can be accrued for helping another perhaps achieve spiritual awakening, or that merit may be transferred for the benefit of a deceased loved one who's no longer able to deal with their life's karma because they died. And that the transference of that positive karma to another, that act in and of itself produces positive karma for the one who gives up that positive karma to help another. I find that to be an intriguing, interesting, and a wonderful thought that I hope works and works well. So now the promise that I made you when I started this talk. My son Aaron is sitting here in the room with me, laughing already. The other night, we went out to the grocery store, and my van was pretty low on gas. And interestingly, right across the parking lot from the grocery store is a gas station. But I didn't really want to stop at the gas station. I had ice cream in the back of the van. I wanted to get it home before it melted. And I thought I had plenty of gas to get me home. And Aaron asked me, gee, why don't you stop and get some gas? And I told him, because I've been driving this van forever, and I know exactly where it runs out of gas, and we have enough gas to get home. Those words no sooner left my mouth than my van ran out of gas. So I shoved her into neutral and coasted onto a little side street. Whereupon, with serious egg on my face, I handed my son the bag of ice cream and sent him to walk home. Wasn't too terribly far. And I walked down to the gas station. The irony of that situation was not lost on me when that occurred. And although I was more than a little ticked, I couldn't help but see the humor in that incident. And so because that occurred, this talk came up. Aaron said that I really should talk about karma. Because as it turns out, the Tao is not without a sense of humor or irony, either one. And so, because I didn't want to do what I knew I should have done, I ran out of gas. Now, that's a funny story, and I encourage you all to have a hearty chuckle. I certainly did. And it wasn't a big deal. I wasn't miles from help. I wasn't, stranded out in the middle of nowhere, thank goodness. But that little bit of arrogance cropped up and bit me when I know good and well there have been times where it wouldn't have. Now, was that universal justice? I don't know. Maybe not. If it was, it was definitely with tongue in cheek. If it wasn't, it still points out the lesson of instant karma. What we do catches up with us a lot sooner than we think. And it does that with remarkable frequency. So it isn't just that we may have a less auspicious rebirth or a more auspicious rebirth. But what we say and do, what we think, what our intents are, what our motivations are, have impact on us in the here and now. Sometimes it's humorous, sometimes it's deadly serious. But it always happens. Just something to think about. So to kind of tie things up here, how we choose to live is going to decide the kind of karma that we accrue. And that's okay, because we are each completely responsible for our own karma. We can change the karma that we accrue anytime we want. We can make that picture different every day. And by cultivating the Tao teachings and applying the wisdom that we gain from them, we can actually reduce the negative karma that we've accrued in our lives prior to becoming aware of the accrual of that karma, and trade that in for the acquisition of positive karma based on a virtuous and decent and worthwhile, wonderful existence that's there simply for the asking. Once again, I don't know why people don't just line up at my door to hear these teachings, to see the results that they produce, and to participate in them. But it doesn't take anything special to start walking down that path. Thank you all very much for letting me share with you this morning. Have a wonderful Sunday, and I hope something I said was beneficial. Thank you much.
Hey, Bill, thank you. That's a very timely topic today. Another remarkable synchronicity.
Boy, is it ever.
Yeah. So Bill, I have a question from Robert. Robert says, Bill, finally a concept of karma. Does following the Tao teachings always lead to good karma?
Following the Tao teachings rightly and appropriately, yeah. It can't help but to lead to good karma. But like I said, and it's unfortunately true, there are always those out there who are going to pervert and twist the truth to their own ends. And if somebody's out there doing that with the teachings that we espouse and embrace, then that karma is in no way positive.
Right. That's actually one of the main points that I want to make today, because in chapter 24 of the Tao Te Ching that we'll discuss today, there's a couple of lines about how Tao cultivators really just despise arrogance. And those lines actually get left out of a very well-known translation. And the reason that it got left out is to distort the original teachings. So that's near and dear to my heart, and I'll talk about that in more details. So Bill, additional remarks for you from Tim. Another excellent presentation, Bill. And the latter points provide good points for contemplation. Similarly, another feedback from Sam as well. I so agree and relate to Bill's remarks today. And then, Bill, finally, one last question for you. Can you please expand on the good and bad being relative in Taoism, yet good karma is explained in terms of an absolute good?
Sure. Good and evil, right and wrong, good and bad, those things are absolutes in the Tao teachings. They are. Are they related? I suppose, from an observational viewpoint. But we all know in our hearts and minds that good and bad exist. We know the difference. And just as the positive and negative karma are absolutes, good and bad intent, good and bad actions are absolutes. There's no such teaching in the Tao that says that there is no good or bad. Okay, the Tao is not a respecter of good and bad. It simply exists. But that doesn't mean that good and bad don't exist.
Another feedback, Bill, from Caroline. Fabulous talk, Mr. Bunting. I'm pleased I lined up at your door this week. Consider me well informed. Thank you.
Thank you all too.
And also thank you from Kevin.
Thanks, folks. I appreciate it.